me, as I mentioned earlier, yes, we are recording the webinar. For me, as I mentioned earlier, it's personal in that I have been a survivor of sexual violence. I do know, how much havoc and disruption it brings into your life. And I would not want this to continue. I'm not comfortable knowing young women are basically living in a prison where what they wear, where they go, what time they go there, with who, what they do with their lives in terms of, the skills they go and register for or not, is all governed by one question: will I be safe? I don't think I'm comfortable with that. And I wouldn't want somebody to go through what I went through. That is my reason. If you feel inclined to, you can share your reason in the chat box as you tell us where you're joining us from. So what is YW4A? The Young Women for Awareness Agency, Advocacy and Accountability. That's what it is. And it's really unique, all right? This is a really unique program done in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. We're so grateful to them for making this possible. And the other partners are World YWCA, YWCA Palestine, YWCA Kenya, Equality Now, YWCA South Sudan, Faith to Action Network, Royal Tropical Institute, and IMC. And why it's unique is that it's bringing together the Netherlands government's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, young women, feminists, gender equality champions, faith-based advocates, gender researchers, legal and policy experts, and they are all, which is groundbreaking, coming together to influence political decision-making on matters that really influence young women's agency and empowerment when it comes to SGBV. So this is something quite remarkable that we're doing. Now, to really go in depth in explaining YW4A, we have a video to play you so that you can understand it just a bit better. So as you can see, we're doing something really remarkable, and we want you to join us in whatever capacity, just to really bring to fruition YW4A. Going into the chat box, I can see a few answers coming into my question earlier. And if you're just joining us, let us know where you're watching from, where you're tuning in from, which country. You can just jot that in the chat box. There is also interpretation, English or Arabic, and you can just click the interpretation little globe icon. And if, as we continue having the conversation, you feel inclined to ask a question, you can drop that in the Q&A. So some of your answers, Patricia from Portugal, we're so glad that you're joining us. You're a criminologist and also a survivor of sexual violence in a country where the means to help exist, but they cause great damage to the victims. I wish to try and begin to help and change the minds of those directly involved in the matter. That is so powerful, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. I can see Ranan Isa says YW4A is important to me in order to help reduce male oppression of women, particularly in Palestine. And you go on to break that down a bit more, which is very important because that's one of the areas YW4A will be. And we're also having William, who's joining us from Uganda Joint Christian Council, and really spirited about working towards ending SGBV. So keep dropping your comments in the chat box. I'll keep jumping in there to see who's joining us from where and what is fueling your drive to help us end SGBV. So as you're doing that, of course, we did mention that there was somebody just sent in a chat from Palestine, and in the video you saw that we're looking to really build capacity among young women in Egypt, in Palestine, in Kenya, and South Sudan. And it seems ambitious, but it is possible, and it is possible if we all play our role in this. So we do hope that at the end of this launch, you will be more inclined to ask, okay, how do I plug in? How do I help? How will I be part of YW4A? So remember, you can use the hashtag if you're sharing the conversation today. Use the hashtag YW4A. There's also a second hashtag, which is Young Women Transform. And the third hashtag is End SGBV, which is really why we're all here today. We have such an amazing panel coming up, really some remarkable people who are just going to be so inspiring. One of them is from right here, actually in Kenya, who is Hawa Puzo Ali. And she is a young woman champion under YW4A. So this is perfect to be able to see how this program can be impactful. And she wears tons of hats. She's a paralegal with Nubian Rights Forum and so much more. We're going to get into that. We also have a little later on in the panel, Dr. Shakira Chunara, who brings in a very interesting angle to this conversation. She's a former Youth Advisory Council member of the AU. Very important when we're talking about some of the areas YW4A is going to be in on the continent of Africa. Where does the AU plug in? And then we have Omar Samra, who I love that is not just an entrepreneur, but an adventurer. I love that. I'm going to add that to my bio. And a motivational speaker and an astronaut candidate. And it's so important to have him come on and really speak to where do men plug in? You know, how do we have strong male allies? And how do we also amplify that they are also part and parcel of this fight to end SGBV? Unfortunately, in the posters, we did have a fourth panelist, Noor Imam, who unfortunately is not able to be here with us today, but we're still going to have a very important conversation. I know she wanted to be here with us. Unfortunately, she couldn't. But at this point, I would love us to listen to a very special message from Casey Harden, who is the General Secretary of the World YWCA and the head of the YW4A Steering Committee.
Greetings from World YWCA. It's a pleasure to be part of this event, bringing in the good vision and the good work of YW4A to the world. YW4A is more than a program, it's more than an initiative, and it's more than a project. It's the manifestation of different ways, different approaches, and different perspectives on how to do things together to make change for good. At the heart of YW4A was a belief in the value of co-creation and design, bringing varied and diverse organizations and leaders to dream of what is possible when we work across sectors and when we center the leadership of young women. Gender-based violence against women and girls is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world. young women globally account for 26% of the 736 million women who report to have been victims of intimate partner violence. If we're to end this violence against women and girls, we need robust interventions, accelerated investments, and political commitment. The YW4A partnership is so pleased to have a unique collaboration and commitment of the Netherlands government's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also young women, and feminists, and gender equality champions, and faith-based advocates, and gender researchers, and legal and policy experts, all having come together to influence political decision-making to facilitate young women's agency and their empowerment in addressing sexual and gender-based violence. With this partnership with the ministry and partners, we have a shared vision of a vibrant civil society space that tackles the root cause of inequality through lobby and advocacy. Civic space is a required precondition for structural change. Through its women's rights and gender equality policy and its policy towards strengthening civil society, the ministry ensures that women's rights organizations and movements have access to critical resources and strategic positioning to play a crucial role in lobbying and advocacy to achieve structural change for gender equality. Guided by YW4A partners' individual and joint missions and visions, SDG 5 and the ministry's inclusive and responsive foreign policy and gender frameworks, a partnership of this nature made absolute sense, and we now consider it a necessity. The World YWCA has committed to reach 100 million young women and girls by 2035 to transform power structures, creating justice, gender equality, and a world without violence and war. YW4A is part of that, and it incorporates leadership capacity building using the World YWCA Rise Up Leadership Training Module. It's a model that's been tried and tested in the Asia and Pacific regions, and now will be used in Africa and the Middle East. For young women to thrive, they need to exist in an environment that enables leadership. As such, we partnered with legal experts in Equality Now to spearhead the legal and policy advocacy work, to tend to the gaps in legal protection frameworks and legal status laws in Egypt, Kenya, Palestine, and South Sudan. We partnered with Faith to Action Network to engage faith leaders and institutions who play a critical part in protecting women in their communities. The inclusion of Faith to Action will result in shifting conservative religious beliefs, social norms, and promoting positive masculinities. We brought in researchers, the Royal Tropical Institute, to support the program with gender research, learning, and critical documentation. To operationalize the work in Kenya, Palestine, and South Sudan, the YWCAs of Kenya, Palestine, and South Sudan are partners in this work. In Egypt, we partnered with the Ibrahimiya Media Center as both a country lead and faith partner. We also work with a host of women's rights organizations and faith-based organizations in each country to ensure localization and sustainability. Today's launch webinar will communicate YW4A's broad vision in more detail. We want to take collective power beyond one single organization to build a social movement and sustain long-term collaborations for change. Therefore, I cordially invite all partners here to join in this advocacy and movement building work of the consortium. With this launch, we're introducing you to our microsite, www.yw4a.org, and our LinkedIn page, YW4A Partnership. We're also officially unveiling our partnership logos in English and Arabic, which were co-created with a creative young woman from Kenya, Lisa Lusa. We also have our new program hashtags, hashtag YW4A, hashtag EndSGBV, and hashtag Young Women Transform. Please join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Netherlands, the YW4A consortium of people and groups, and especially young women, to end sexual and gender-based violence.
Such an important message there from Casey Harden. And, she just echoed a lot of things that I think are important, centering young women in this work that we do, understanding that violence against women is a human rights violation, and really just echoing the call to ask you who's joining us today for this launch to plug in, help us amplify YW4A and really get to the point where we end SGBV. I want to move on to our next speaker, who I'm so honored to have here today, and also just knowing that she's feeling a bit unwell, but this was so important that she made sure that she was still going to join us and share a few words with us. And that's Frauke Gasteland, who is the Senior Policy Advisor, Task Force Women Rights and Gender Equality.
Thank you, Adele. I'm very happy to be here and welcome everyone. Thank you also for the invitation for this global launch for the Young Women for Awareness program today. Well, my name is Frauke Gasteland. I work for the Task Force Women's Rights and Gender Equality at the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm also the focal point for this program. So I'm extremely happy to be here and to see that, well, over 100 participants are joining from all over the globe. It's amazing. I look forward today to exchange more knowledge with you on how young women, feminists, and faith-based actors lobby and advocate to end violence against women and girls. Let's jointly unpack the fundamentals of awareness, agency, advocacy, and accountability in ending violence against young women in Africa and the Middle East. Today, I want to exchange on how we as strategic partners will join forces in our work on women empowerment and the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. A strong civil society accelerates development and is essential for a democratic, inclusive, and violence-free society. This contributes to good governance, transparency, and accountability, which is indispensable for building peaceful, prosperous, and violence-free societies. But creating such a strong, open, and inclusive civil society will not be successful without paying specific attention to women and girls. As we all know, gender equality has not been achieved anywhere in the world. And it's estimated that worldwide, 1 in 3 women and girls experience physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime. Well, some people might think this is a woman's problem. It really is not. Sexual and gender-based violence is a systematic problem, not only a women's problem. And therefore, we should not only empower and support women and girls, but we also need to engage men and boys and local and political and the religious leaders. It is important that we see women's potential instead of their vulnerability and victimhood. Supporting women and girls goes beyond the moral and will actually accelerate the support of civil society. Besides the efficiency of including women in all activities of civil society, as they're half of the population, they should be seen as what they are, agents of change. Supporting women will accelerate prosperity in all levels of society, as the impact they make are interconnected. Empowered women accelerate development in the communities, as their representation not only positively affects the decision-making process, but also creates a shift in gender bias. This result also holds its effects in the national and global level. The Netherlands stands for a strong civil society and underlines the importance of active and meaningful involvement of civilians at all levels. And therefore, the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs launched a new policy framework strengthening civil society in 2021. Specific attention goes to the realization of women's rights and gender equality through the SDG 5 Fund, which is the largest women's fund in the world. To realize women's rights and gender equality and bringing about sustainable social change, women's rights organizations play a crucial role. Under the Power of Women program, the government of the Netherlands wants to exclusively support women human rights organizations. This 5-year program aims to strengthen the capacity of women's rights organizations in the areas of lobby and advocacy. Because the role of women's rights organizations is vital to foster social, economic, and political transformation in order to achieve equal rights and opportunities for women and girls. Within the Power of Women program, we support organizations in over 50 countries that are focusing on advocacy and lobbying. The strategic partnership between the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and civil society organizations, just like this consortium, is crucial in achieving our goals on strengthening civil society and ending violence against women and girls. Working as strategic partners together with faith-based organizations and leaders, young women and women's rights organizations and leaders on the fundamentals of ending violence against women and girls is extremely important to realize sustainable results. I would like to share my gratitude for the way you intend to work together with progressive faith allies, policy and legal experts in the African and Middle East and North African regions. These young women and women rights organizations advocate and hold governments to account on young women's human rights. Embedding and strengthening the voices of young women and girls in efforts to prevent and stop violence against all women and girls, and recognizing them as agents of change is a priority for the Dutch government. Therefore, I'm happy to be part of this launch today and to see a global youth panel here with so many inspiring and dedicated people. The global launch of the Young Women for Awareness project as part of the Power of Women program is an important and memorable moment in our strategic cooperation for the coming years. And I'm looking forward to see how you will build a strong intergenerational network of women leaders supporting women's individual and collective power to champion social change and safeguard their human rights. Because without women's rights, gender equality, and a world free of violence against all women and girls, we will simply not achieve the other SDGs. Thank you for organizing this great global launch, and I can't wait to work together in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Frauke, for sharing such important words with us, understanding the role of civil society, understanding the role of different members of the society at large, and how important this is for us, not only when you're looking at SDG 5, but really across the board. So a lot is banking on this. And yeah, we're glad that you were able to join us today, and get well soon. I'm really sorry that you're feeling a bit sick. We're also very thankful to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands for really believing in this very unique consortium that is striving and working towards ending SGBV, that is the YW4A. If you are just joining this global launch, please get into the chat. That's the first room to get into. Let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. I see Ruba from YWCA Palestine, Cindy Ketch from Kenya, and you can also share why this is very important to you when it comes to YW4A, when it comes to ending SGBV. Just drop us a note in there. And as the various speakers share their thoughts, if you have a question, head over to the Q&A section and drop that there. And of course, we do have translations in English and Arabic, so click the translation icon and then pick which of the two languages works best for you. But right about now, both Casey and Frauke said something that I really truly believe in, which is centering the young women that we're talking about. So I have a video for you to hear from some of these young women and why it's so important to them that we end SGBV.
SGBV is the most prevalent human rights violence in the world. In Palestine, we have, in my opinion, all the types, like sexual harassment, verbal harassment. We will find verbal harassment in the public transportation, in schools, in companies, in the street. We have also a lot of stories in incest, and also we have a lot of rape stories.
The government can first adopt the family protection bill. That way they can create a safe space for women and young girls to be safe at home and to be able to speak when they're suffering domestic violence or sexual violence inside the home. That's a very important step to take because it starts from home. Most violence starts from home, or most sexual harassment starts from home. So by initiating this bill or adopting this bill, they can create a safe space.
Today I'm sitting here very excited about the YW4A's project that has been launched in our county. It has brought so much for us as women, and even give us a voice and even a path to follow as a woman. So I'm so excited, looking forward to work in the community, educate my people, and bring a change that not most of the women in the community could have imagined the YW4A project. Being part of the Rise Up model training as a young woman leader, I have been able to work with other young women, empower them to voice their rights, to voice their opinions on certain things in regards to gender-based violence.
صار عندي فرص أكتر إنه تطورت فيها.
ساعدتني في إن أنا إزاي أعرف حقوقي، سلطت الضوء على الطريق اللي فيه خطوات واضحة للمناصرة العامة والقانونية.
That's a very important video so that we can really understand the impact that YW4A can have on young women who are already using their voices in their communities to help end SGBV. I know you saw Howard in the video. She's part of our panel, so we're going to get to her in a bit. But it is about that time for us to get to know our panelists and really have the conversation that can help us ensure that YW4A is a success. And so I would like to first introduce you to our first panelist, who is Dr. Shakira Chunara, and we're going to have such an important conversation with her because of, just kind of like the background of the work that she's been involved with. She's a former Youth Advisory Council member of the African Union. So that's very important to know. Where does the African Union come in when we're talking about matters ending SGBV? She's an award-winning health researcher, very bold activist, clearly a multitasker, because while this global launch is going on, I've been seeing your tweets coming in with the hashtag YW4A, really just echoing what we're here doing today. And in 2017, she was the Woman of the Year in Health Award recipient. She currently serves as the thematic lead in UN Women and is a specialist with the WHO and is AMREF Health Africa's Health Program Committee resource person. So really, Dr. Shakira is bringing a wealth of knowledge, and we're really glad to have you here with us today. Let's start first with, going back into the past, you being part of the Youth Advisory Council for the African Union. That's a good place to start, as YW4A will exist in some African countries. And what has been your experience in having such huge regional bodies such as the AU play a role in advancing young women's rights? And do you think there's some gaps between policy, programs, and impact on the ground?
Well, thanks, and it's lovely to check in. And I'm seeing, the chat box being off the charts per se. I'm going to speak very frankly, and many of you are going to fall off your chairs as I speak as well, but I think it's important. And even when I was in the African Union, I was never quiet, I was never diplomatic, and I'm never going to be, because I believe that to solve gender-based violence, we've got to be as loud and disruptive and as real as possible. So even when I served within the African Union, I remember, as it was, just a few minutes before this discussion, I remember a mic drop moment where everybody almost passed out when I asked this. And so when we're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, or gender-based violence across the different types, it's not just what should happen at a country level, but it's also what should happen within institutions. Now, a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, when I joined the African Union, there was this media leak, an article around sexual harassment cases within the African Union. And after this media leak, we never heard much. We heard a statement here and there, some policies here and there. But what I wanted to highlight is that the African Union is not the only organization. We see several international NGOs. We see several UN bodies, for example, embroiled in these scandals. So the very institutions and the very decision makers and the very policy makers who should be advancing gender equality are actually the perpetrators. And these spaces themselves are not safe for us as young women. And we need to talk about what's our safety element in decision-making spaces. So one, we're advocating to get there. But two, when we get there, it's actually a problem. And I remember when I just joined, and I've been fortunate to scale through all of that. I had a couple of colleagues who said to me on my very first day of training at the African Union, Shakira, do not go to meet any men in the AU alone. Take a friend with. Now, that's the realities. And what I am saying to you and the audience is something that people are not going to talk about. It's all shoved under the carpet. So that's the one starting point. In our spaces, in our development spaces as well, I've seen young women at conferences being taken advantage of who don't know better. And we as the elder women need to sort of take care of them. What we notice as female colleagues when we're traveling to humanitarian settings or rural settings, we tend to stay in rooms close to each other because we're fearful of what could happen. So I'm trying to build in the reality. So the institutions, and let this message go very loud and very viral and very global, is that the institutions who are meant to advance gender equality are themselves embroiled in this mess. I'll then go on into talking a little bit about when policymakers actually take things seriously. The one is if it's breaking news. If it's not breaking news, unfortunately, swept under the carpet. Two, and I'm speaking from a perspective of being there, and I think it's inroads for us. Two, is if funding is linked. If we see any government wanting to fund this, any institution, suddenly policymakers snap up their fingers and they're ready to do the work. I don't know why they need funding to do this. The three is when, and it echoes what the previous speakers have said, is a civil society push. And I've seen, for example, the accountability framework on sexual reproductive health, the scorecard on sexual reproductive health, and the Maputo Protocol, the African Union, being taken up because of a civil society push, emailing, driving people crazy, that sort of thing. I'll then end off, because I don't want to take the entire panel, and I think I've given very many boom moments, but I'll end off also with one more, saying that in my term as a young woman and as a young activist within the African Union, I was very vocal because I wanted to push issues like gender equality. I wanted to push sexual and reproductive health. I wanted to push the agenda of young people living with HIV. But what was I met with? And there's a publication about this. I was met with bureaucracy. I was met with disorganization. I was met with just do a social media post or just come and be a speaker. I'm sorry, that's not the impact I want to drive. So what I'm saying is that it's really challenging to get our issues onto the agenda. And there's this juxtaposition. The African Union, for example, talks about Agenda 2063, peaceful setting, reducing violence, silencing the guns, yet we're seeing a continent which is marred by violence. It's quiet on the Tigray issue in the very country where the headquarters are based. So that's a lot of food for thought, and let me stop there for now.
Yeah, it's food for thought, but it's such important food, because it's, we want young women to take up spaces in policy making on a continental level. But one, are they going to be safe in those spaces? Two, are they going to be impactful, or are the structures not efficient enough, And so these are really important points that you have to bring up. I think when we're having conversations around ending SGBV, we've got to be frank, we've got to be honest, even brutally so that we know what we need to sort out. When you step back, Dr. Shakira, from YW4A, and you kind of step back and you look at it from bird's eye view, what must we not miss in the implementation of this program? How do we ensure success in your view?
I think I've been so fortunate to work at the policy level and at the very ground level. And for me, Adele, I posted a video a couple of weeks ago, is that it's the women and girls that I've worked with who've told me every time we have a safe space or we have interviews or something like that, so many people open up, even our colleagues open up about being survivors. And I think at the heart of all of this is, how do we get that help on the continent? It's so exciting to see the partnership working in South Sudan. Countries like that, the healthcare system is in tatters. Where does one go? Even in a country like South Africa, if something like that had to happen to me, I mean, I was a victim of crime a couple of years ago, and I tried to seek help from the police, and it was just a nightmare. So imagine if you're going through SGBV. And so I think that my message to those who are implementing is those very women on the ground, that very initial first line response, we need to be there, because that's really where it's needed, not the fancy policy spaces.
Absolutely. And, it goes back to Casey's message, which is like, you've got to center the women. You've got to center who you're doing this for, and across the board, not only specific spaces. And I totally agree with you there. I'm going to rope in our second panelist. And before I do, if what Dr. Shakira has said already has fired and fueled something in you, and you have a question for her, you can just go to the Q&A section and just drop the question in there. We're going to have a Q&A right at the end of the panel, and we'd love to hear from you. It might be a question, or it might be a comment on what she said. Make sure you drop that in the Q&A section as well. So I want to bring in Omar Samra, who, as I mentioned earlier, had quite the interesting bio: adventurer, motivational speaker, astronaut candidate, entrepreneur, and he is an Equality Now board member and an honorary ambassador to Nepal. And really, with the work that you've done, Omar, we can really dive into the role of masculinity and male allies in this space. So we're really glad that you could be here with us today, Omar.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here, Adele. I've been listening to everything. Very exciting to be with you guys today.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. I know you're in London, but we're going to be talking about back home, isn't it? And just kind of unpack in Egypt. When we go back to, say, 2014, that's when the anti-sexual harassment law in Egypt came into fruition. And then in 2021, Egypt increased its penalty for sexual harassment, which is very important. And I wanted to know from your own standpoint about your role in advancing this policy action. How was that journey? What are some of the gains and what are some of the gaps you saw while going through that?
Well, first of all, full disclosure, I mean, I apologize for the background noise that I have, but I have to say that I take no to very little credit of all the progress that's happened over the past years. I think my role was a role of sort of an individual that was, living through that horrific period, from 2014, 2015. But I think the height of what became the Me Too movement in Egypt was in 2020. And there was a series of cases that saw the public light that were just dreadful. That has been happening for many years, but it really was sort of brimming to the top. And for me, it was I was sort of moved to action and to speak about it, just because I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The fact that the thing that was very troubling to me at the time was that there were so very few male voices speaking about the issue. And actually the fact that people would come to me and would thank me for speaking about the issue only frustrated me more, actually, and made me realize that how far behind we are, because as men, we have to take responsibility to a great deal of everything that's happening. And I think that what I've done and what other men have done in terms of speaking out about the issue is the absolute minimum that we can do. This was a time where we tried to reach out to male figures and public figures and celebrities. A lot of people were unwilling to speak about it. There's obviously a cultural stigma as a man, and I'm sure we'll talk about the topic of toxic masculinity. It was a huge stigma to be, as a man, to speak about the issue. And then how would you be seen by other men if you talk about the issue? So it was sort of like, who comes first? I ended up collaborating with a few women that were activists in that regard at the time. And we managed to create a video that went viral, and I was actually picked up by mainstream media, where we reached out to hundreds of women who were brave enough to come out and just say a very simple sentence in Arabic, which is, "I have been sexually harassed." And so we created this video, which had more than 100 women, all back to back, saying that statement from all walks of life, ethnicities, and that was. I only played a small role in that. But we started off with that campaign trying to bring the celebrities in, just trying to mimic the Me Too movement of how it transpired in the US. But ultimately, we didn't get any support initially. And so what we did was we reached out to, to the mass population. And then we were flooded with messages, and we were flooded with support. And it just goes to show, how this issue is really, it's something that's felt by everyone. I mean, we all know that, more than 98% of women, certainly in Egypt, have experienced some form of sexual harassment. So I regard it personally as, one of the largest, if not the, it is the largest human rights crisis that exists today. And I started thinking of how can I be of service other than the advocacy that I was attempting to play a role in. And this is when I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Equality Now and get nominated to the board. And so it was really amazing to see this intersection between advocacy, but also organizations working on the legality side of things, to be able to it's important to be able to shout and to make our voices heard and to keep applying pressure. But it's also to collaborate with entities like Equality Now that are able to pass laws and to put pressure to changing the constitution and really kind of status in the courtrooms and in that way. And obviously, it's also important to continue to also work hard to avail resources because obviously all of this work requires funding. And that's not something that any one entity or any one individual can do just themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you spoke about just introspecting and trying to figure out what is your role as a man and how can you be more efficient. And maybe you could speak to that, because it is important for there to be male allies. And the problem that you went through, not having enough men join into your campaign, want to be part of the video, is a problem that can be seen across various countries when different women who are fighting to end SGBV are kind of looking on their male counterparts to speak up. I know I've gone through that. So maybe you can speak to, we have very many men, and I saw in the chat box, coming in, and maybe you could speak to their role in this fight and how do they introspect and still center the young women or the women and girls who are suffering this human rights violation.
Sure, I think there is. I mean, let's say I'm from the African region, North Africa. I also represent Egypt. Is part of the Middle East as well, and I think we're definitely on a back foot. So is many places in the world on that front. I think if we're talking about the notion of toxic masculinity, which is perpetuated in my country and in other places in the region, it's basically this sort of cultural pressure that allows men or pressures men into behaving in a certain way. Men are required culturally to be tough. So you must be strong. You mustn't show emotions. Which leads you actually to sometimes being completely emotionally unavailable. This actually, from one side, can lead actually to harmful effects on the men themselves in terms of mental health, but obviously has much more serious consequences to society at large and women especially. Men find themselves pressured to reject anything that's considered feminine, including accepting help. And that also exasperates the problem, because men are then forced into a corner and they cannot there's no one to go to feel so they cannot turn to the women, but they can also not turn to the men as well. So that could be a very uncomfortable place to be. And then this is a wider situation where there's the assumption that men can only gain respect in societies by obtaining sort of power and status. And the only way to be able to achieve that is through perpetuating dominance, aggression in some cases, and even homophobia. And so it's a vicious cycle. But then how do you get out of that cycle? So then it's important just to mention a few words about positive masculinity. So the flip side of that, how can we as men take on the responsibility of trying to change the narrative? And I think it's quite simple, actually. I mean, it's obviously takes time and it's harder said than done. It requires education and awareness, but it's actually simply to listen, for men to listen, to accept that they are potentially wrong, potentially that the ways that they have been told and how things are not correct, acknowledging male privilege, understanding that just by virtue of being a man, you are in a very privileged position, and you may not be able to put yourself in a woman's shoes, and to be, even no matter how much of a feminist you are, how much you are sympathetic to the cause, you are just by definition unable to understand the kind of sort of situation that women get put on in a daily basis. As a man, when I get out of my home and I walk down the street, I do not have to worry about a fraction of the things a woman would worry about. It's not even, I cannot even process that and fathom it. So just to open myself to the notion that I don't understand, and I will probably not be able to understand in a way, to be able open myself to that understanding and to listen to other women, take their point of view, and be part of the solution. I think that's a really good step in the right direction, because a lot of men just jump quickly to the idea of not all men are this way, not all men in this way, which completely defeats the point, because it is not about you, it's not about us. It's about people who have all this violence being perpetuated against them. And so we can definitely do well but by listening and accepting the privilege, which is the case, I think, all around the world.
Absolutely. It's so important to always acknowledge your privilege, and as you've said, center the people who are affected by this issue, which is the women and girls. And so I'm so thankful to you, Omar. And now I have to be the one to apologize for my background noise. My neighbor's dog wants to be part of the conversation. However, I want to call on our third panelist, but do remember, as you've listened to Dr. Shakira, as you've listened to Omar, if there are questions that you have, drop them in the Q&A. If there are comments or something they said resonated with you, you can also put that in the chat box. I see Fergana saying, thank you, Omar, so well put. And Barbara Jimenez, I hope I pronounced that right, saying thank you, Omar, for your message. So I would like to call on our next panelist, who we saw in a video earlier on, and she's just doing amazing work. Her name is Hawa Puzo Ali, and she's a young woman champion under YW4A. So it's so important that we hear from her, and she wears tons of hats, okay? She's a paralegal with the Nubian Rights Forum, a paralegal with Darajambili Vision Volunteers, which is an organization in Kisii, right here in Kenya, that specializes in adolescent girls mentorship on SGBV and SRHR. And she's also a volunteer with the Young Women Christians Association Kisii branch, and has previously worked with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights to map out human rights defenders in Western Kenya. So really, Howard does embody the spirit of YW4A, and it's just so inspiring. And we're so honored to have you here with us. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Adele, and you?
I'm great. Really interested in knowing you a bit better. So maybe we can start with that, actually. We can start with your journey and how the spark to join this fight to end SGBV was ignited in your life.
Okay. I don't know even where to start. Like, I have so many stories. I'm Hawa Ali Kuzo. I'm a paralegal with the Nubian Rights Forum, and I'm also a volunteer with YWCA Kisii. And I'm also a paralegal with Darajambili, like you had said, and I'm a gender activist in Kisii County. So I started my journey of activism in 2018 after I suffered emotional, I can say it was emotional and also physical. So I'm a volunteer and I'm a volunteer and a survivor. Back in 2018, I was seeing someone who I really wanted to be with him in my life. He came home, did a proposal and everything, but things didn't go well because a few months later, he was very violent, physical, and I went through so much. So after I left there, I had a breakdown. Actually, I suffered depression for 6 months and I was on medication for some time. Then I later recovered when I met a friend who held my hand and made me understand that, these things do happen and you need to understand you're a woman and you need to pick yourself up. So that is when I started my journey of activism. And it wasn't an easy journey considering I'm a single mom of 2. So you can imagine how the society was treating me coming from a Muslim community. You are not married. So I went through so much. But at the end of the day, I have a smile on my face and I can say I've conquered. Because if my community can sit down and gladly say, like, we have our girl out there, she's doing amazing thing, I'm touching people's hearts, I can say it's the most amazing thing that I've achieved so far in my journey as a gender activist and a paralegal.
Yeah, I'm really sorry you had to experience such violence, and I'm just thankful that you're here with us today, and you know, you can hold other survivors' hands. And I think that's really powerful for you to have turned something so terrible that you went through and built and used your skill, use your humanity to kind of pay it forward. So as somebody has written, Catherine, in the group, how are the embodiment of centering young women. You really are. You have alluded to, you know, the intersectionality of religion and what role it plays when it comes to ending SGBV. And maybe we can unpack that a bit more. How in your experience as an activist, where does religion come into play in us ending SGBV?
Our religions are the key. I can say that the key role give us to end all these things, whatever is happening, because they have a platform where they can talk about what is happening to our ladies. But sadly, most of these religions are the ones making our women not to talk. Like, for example, I had a case of a young woman. They were discontent couple. The father was a pastor, and the lady was married to a certain guy who was also an engineer. But the sad part is, one day this guy decided to take an iron box and just place it on this woman's butt. Adele, it was a sad scenario. But sadly, we followed the case, filed for a case, take the lady through the legal process. But you know, this girl had to go back to that man because the father could not take her back, considering she's coming from a community where if you're married, you don't have a way back home. If that marriage ends, you have to stay there, because if you come home, even if you die, you'll be buried outside. And even if you'll remarry to another guy, when you die, the first husband still has a say about you. So religion has a very, very important role to play in making women's rights be heard in the society. And if we will not use our religion to make these people understand how important it is for a woman to be recognized, I'm very sorry, no matter how hard we try, it will not work, because our religion is the mother of everything. Our spiritual way starts in our churches and mosques, and we cannot use these spiritual homes to mentor our ladies and our young men, to make them understand that a woman should be respected and taken care of and not beaten or humiliated. I think that will be the biggest achievement we'll have if we use these two places, a mosque and churches.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you, and I echo those thoughts. You know, we saw you in the video really speaking to YW4A, and so I really just want to know, this is probably a question just for me, to know, how has the YW4A, you know, program empowered you so far? Are there some benefits, and what are those benefits you've seen?
When I talk about the YW4A project, I'm so excited. I don't know how I can put it. This is something that has mentored me as a person, both in legal way and advocacy, and even just going back to the community, sharing whatever we've been taught out there and giving them the information that this project has. It has bring a great impact, especially in my community. I come from a Muslim community, so first of all, a project like YW4A, they considered it a Christian project. So, but right now, I can tell you, I'm excited. I have young girls already, like they want to be like who I am today. They're like, we want to join them. We hear they're a good organization. So there is a lot of inspiration with our young girls, and our mothers have understood that it's when it comes to SGBV, it's not about the religion. It's just about each and every person to take care of themselves and the people they love, and it's not all about thinking of Christianity or Muslim or Hindu or anything. For this project, it has brought so much in my community, and I just want to say a special thank you for them. And I'm hoping when this project ends, we will have women who can speak for themselves, stand for themselves without even us, because project comes and go. but the empowerment that they will get will stick with them forever, and they can even defend themselves without us. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. When you leave somebody with that empowerment, it kind of gives birth to something else. They'll stay with it and they will form their own programs. They will keep fighting and they'll have the skills and the capacity to do so. So I'm so thankful, Hawa. When I'm next in Kisii, I will look for you.
And I love your smile. Please keep it that way. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
I will. Thank you so much. And so, we have our Q&A going on. So if you have any questions for Dr. Shakira, Omar, and even for Hawa, you can just drop them in the Q&A tab at the bottom, and we will be sampling some right now. There is a question here that came from Roland Absaya from Cameroon. Roland, we're so happy that you're here with us. And you are the founding president of the association Secours des Filles Mères. I hope I didn't butcher that. You want to know, is there a possibility of partnership with organizations in French-speaking Africa for the rights of women and girls? And so what I will do is call on Tabani, who's part of the team, to just step in and answer that question from Cameroon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Tabani.
Okay, so unfortunately, it seems my network is a bit unstable, so I'm just going to be off camera for now. But yes, we are open to partnerships, because one of the things that we're aiming for is to create coalitions for change. If we are to make any meaningful change with regards to sexual and gender-based violence, it means that we can't work on our own, but we need to create a movement towards changing either policies or working with the different activists or advocates to advocate for change. So we are open to partnerships, we are open to collaboration and exploring any ways we can work together for change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tabani. And yeah, so if you feel like you definitely want to lend your voice to this or kind of explore a partnership, make sure that you reach out, which is what this global launch is all about. And if you want to amplify this, maybe there's somebody who couldn't be here today and would want to be part of YW4A or help, or they're in line with the work that we want to do with this program. Share this particular webinar or the YW4A program on your social media handles. Just use the hashtag YW4A so that more people can get to know about this, and so that we can actually add more voices in helping us end SGBV. That's another one of the hashtags, which is hashtag end SGBV. And the third hashtag is hashtag Young Women Transform. I'm going to step into the chat box in a bit, but first, this is one of the most important videos because we are now officially launching YW4A. And here's a video to mark this amazing moment, and it will show you exactly how you can join us as part of this program. Yes, so make sure you do visit www.YW4A.org and amplify this message on social media channels, share it across all your networks so that we can have more people join us. There's one more question that has come in from Juliet from Nigeria, and she's asking, how do you plan to leverage digital technology to improve reach to more women and improve awareness? So Tabani, if you're still on, are you able to answer this question?
Yes, Adele, I'm still here. Okay, so I think leveraging digital technology also depends on the young women and where they are and if they can access technology. I think the one thing that we have learned with the COVID pandemic is that there's a need for us to be creative in how we communicate without having to meet physically. So definitely using the digital spaces is quite critical. So where young women can access such spaces, we do our activities online. So for example, World YWCA has the Rise Up leadership training for young women, which we are working towards having it online so that as many young people can have access to it. We also have safe spaces, which traditionally we have held them physically, but we, as World YWCA, what we have done is we've worked towards having them virtually, and we are in the process of working with young women to try and refine our strategies towards engaging more young women online through these virtual spaces. So these are some of the examples that we have towards trying to leverage on the opportunities that come with technology. But this is a learning process, so it's just the beginning, and we are open to also putting our heads together to find ways in which to take advantage of these opportunities. Thanks, Adele.
Thanks, Tabani. I hope, Juliet, that answers your question. So really, you know, if you go to the microsite, there is a lot more information there, which is www.YW4A.org. And if you see opportunities for you to partner or to lend your voice, or maybe you have an opinion you want to share on the direction the program is going, of course you can do that. And don't forget to share that this program has officially been launched globally. Just use the hashtags YW4A, hashtag Young Women Transform, and hashtag End SGBV. So we have come to the end of the global launch. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to join us today. It's so important for us to show up to do this very important work. I want to thank all our panelists today, Dr. Shakira, Omar, Hawa, for sparing the time to share your experiences with us, but also for the very important work you're doing in your own capacities in trying to end SGBV. I want to thank, of course, Frauke, and of course the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands for really championing and joining this partnership and making it see the light of day, and Casey for the wonderful words that just framed our discussion today. So it's really such a remarkable partnership from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands, World WYCA, YWCA Palestine, YWCA Kenya, Equality Now, YWCA South Sudan, Faith to Action Network, Royal Tropical Institute, and IMC. Thank you for being partners to see this program, YW4A, see the light of day. So my name is Adele Onyango. It's been such an honor to moderate this global launch for you. And I'm just speaking power to YW4A. It's very important work that we're all doing. And let's make this the success that we know it can be. Thank you so much for joining us.